Welcome everyone to another workshop here for the test camp, and thanks to our hosts here today. This is FTCE Elementary Education K through 6 Science, and let's discuss how learning and practicing test skills will empower your test confidence. Now, those of you joining us live online, we wish you could be here in person, but of course you're welcome to contribute your comments anytime. We're going to include them up here in the discussion boards. And if you joined us on demand directly through the Test Camp YouTube channel, well, of course, you have an advantage. You can pause or restart or replay that video anytime. Again, this workshop is for the elementary education test, and most of you here today have already scheduled this test. Is that right? All right, I got a question over here, and I'm going to repeat your question for those who are listening to the recording. Go right ahead. Yes, as you'll see, we're going to cover all the competencies on these tests, but we do them in separate workshops. So this workshop is just specifically for science. All right, good question. All right, you likely know by now that around here the motto is prepare, practice, perform. Everyone who has successfully completed the training has passed their test. And that's possible because test taking is a skill which requires practice, and this is the only place to learn and practice those test skills until you get them until they're second nature. So to prepare here at the test camp means to understand yourself, an honest assessment of how well you know the test content, but also your testing skills. And we're going to start here today by learning the blueprint. Many of you have participated in those career workshops, and you know that the blueprint provides all the information you need to fully understand a test. All right, how many of you here have participated in one of these two workshops up here? Okay, a couple of you have. Well, it's not mandatory, but it's something to know about how the pathways, you can get the pathways into teaching, and why do we require so much testing in the USA right now. Now, this can also be a good first step to creating what we call my study plan. This is a schedule that includes reviewing and studying the test content. All right, let's learn about that blueprint. Here's an overview of the entire elementary subject area exams. Okay, notice that this one big exam is a series of 4 individual tests, and each one is very different. That's one reason why many teachers and teacher candidates decide to schedule 2 days to complete the exam rather than attempting to pass all the tests in just one day. Now, is there anybody here that's done that before or has any experience with that? Yes, go ahead and I'll repeat your comments for the people listening in on the recording. So you can break it up, or you were able to break it up in 2 separate days. Did you have to pay extra for the second day? You did not, all right? But I would suggest that everybody, if you're going to do that, you want to check that in advance. When you set up your dates, make sure, and maybe you do want to pay extra, but just make sure of what it costs and what dates are available. Now your science test up here, you can see it up here? Right, it's 55 questions, and it says there the time allotted is about 70 minutes, so a little over 1 minute per question. Now knowing this helps you put you on a pace for success. Time management's not really an issue on this test, and you'll see why when you come to the training center, because you decide when to answer a question and when to mark and save it for the next pass through your test. Today, what we're going to start doing is to identify the types of science questions you can expect to encounter on this test. Now, not what types of questions by format. We know that all 55 are multiple choice. What we're doing is identifying the science competencies. Yep, that on each question is built. And on this test, there are 5, really 6, but 5 main competencies, and we provide practice on each one of those. I'll show you in just a moment. So that first quiz, or that we build for that first competency, we call that nature of science. So if you take a quiz based on this competency, that provides you instant feedback and points you in a direction to review and study. The second competency is physical science. Can you imagine what might be asked about this competency? Well, we're going to take a closer look, including some sample questions in just a minute. The third competency is odd for here in Florida. They combine earth science and space science together. Florida, I believe, is about the only state that does that. However, here at the test camp, we do provide separate sets of exercises and quizzes for both. So that'll help you out when you're trying to decide where you need to go and review or study. All right, so before we go any further, take a moment to introduce yourself there at the tables. And we're going to let you identify the final 2 remaining competencies here. If you can do that, we still have a little bit of time before we get back together. talk about what questions might look like in each one of these competencies. So we got two of them that are missing. See if you can figure those two out, and then we'll rejoin back here as a group. All right, for you folks joining us live online today, go ahead and share your thoughts and we'll include them in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand by the Test Camp YouTube channel, this might be a good time to pause the recording and identify these last two competencies. We'll be back when you restart the video. Okay, we're back up here. Life science is the fourth one. Did any of the groups get life science? All right, well, we'll look at some sample questions in just a minute, and we'll talk more about the study resources that you can find for these. Very inexpensive. The fifth competency we have is teaching science. Did you have that one? Yes, for those of you who have been in the other workshops, you likely remember that the Florida subject area exams include this competency, and they can be up to 20% of the test. Yes, over here. Yes, you're correct. I'll repeat that. Yes, they are not on the general knowledge test, right? There's nothing about teaching on the general knowledge test in Florida. Good point. Now let's take a closer look at each competency, starting up there with nature of science. According to the test information guide, skills related to this competency include the theories and laws of science, experiments that lead to a better understanding of those theories and laws, and the effects of science on society and culture. And here's the first sample question. And before we go any farther, let's see how many honest folks we have here. Raise your hand if you started up here. Come on, we got any honest people? This is where you start when you read? How about if you started down here at the answer set? All right, well, this is what we're going to suggest that you do. Thank you for being honest about that. We learned this, didn't we? Yeah, we talked about this strategy in the other workshops. It helps keep you focused on the competency, right? And it gives you a preview to the question. All right, so anyway, this is one that has to do with, what did we say, nature of science. Let's move on to another one. Another example. All right, and another one, is this going to be, you started down there? I hope. All right, how about this last one? Is this going to be a nature of science question? Can you tell by just looking at the answer set? Yes, it is. So that's how it works. Let's move on to the second competency, physical sciences. The knowledge you need to demonstrate on this test related to physical sciences include matter, the properties of matter and how matter changes, and energy. And the categories for energy are chemical, electrical, and mechanical. Let's look at a couple of sample questions. Starting down there at the bottom, mixtures, matter, compounds, molecules. All right, you see now why this is physical science. Here's another sample question. Yeah, that's right. If you didn't hear her, you can see the word chemistry is right there in the question itself, in the stem. Okay, how about this next one? Can you tell? Texture, volume, gravity, density. What's the concept here? Right, matter. Physical science question. I think we have one more of these. Is this a physical science question? Over here. Yes, it is. Why? Energy. Right, what type of energy? Electrical energy. There you go. All right, on to the third competency, or actually the third and fourth. Only in Florida do they combine these, but let's take time for you to work together at the tables again. Decide what knowledge might be expected about Earth science and how that might be different from space science. Okay, take a couple of minutes and we'll see what you come up with there at the tables, and we'll talk about that as one big group. All right, if you joined us today live online, share your thoughts and we'll include them in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this might be another good time to pause the recording and test your knowledge. See if you can discriminate between Earth science, what might those questions look like, and space science. And we'll be here when you return, when you restart the video. All right, a very good discussion about how the competencies, Earth and space sciences might be represented on your test. Let's see what the test information guide has to say, starting with Earth science. All right, do you have your list ready? Okay, you jotted some things down. All right, understanding Earth science includes knowing about geology. Who had that on here? Ology, the study of the Earth, right. And more specifically in the test information guide, the physical structure of the Earth and its history. Another area is atmosphere, the blanket of gas that surrounds the Earth. Right, so atmosphere is not about space science, it's about Earth science. But of course you're not asked that on the test. It's just another way for you to be able to discern the difference so that you can study more easily. So what would be the questions related to atmosphere? What would you think? Maybe the spheres, like lithosphere, biosphere. Okay, good. The next concept in Earth science then is transfer of energy. Can anybody give us an example? Yes, ma'am, over here. Solar panels, right. A transfer of energy from solar or the sun into electrical power. Right. All right, well, let's look at some questions from the test camp quizzes, see if you can identify them as Earth science. Here's the first example, starting down there with the answers. Okay, study of the Earth, right? Geology. Another sample. Earth science, atmosphere, right? And here's another example. We're not trying to answer these, we're trying to identify the competencies. Well, there's the word transfer right there. It's in the stem. So you might also be aware of another type of Earth science question. These are fairly new. How would you describe this question in just one word? It's Earth science, sustainability. I like that. What else we got out there? Conservation. Okay, I like that. Recycling. All right, so be on the lookout for some of these types of questions too on the newer tests. All right, that's a look at the concepts related to Earth science. Let's look at those related to space science. Again, there are many concepts in this part of the competency, but we have time in this workshop, and we're just going to focus on the main ones, which are Sun, Earth, and Moon, the solar system, and space exploration. All right, let's take a look at some examples of questions, starting down there at the bottom. And again, starting with the answer set. And I believe this is the last one on this space science. All right, so they're not just science questions, they're space science questions. All right, before we go any further, are there any other questions related to anything we've talked about here so far? Okay? Yes, go ahead and I'll repeat for those listening to the recording. Yes, thank you. All the questions are mixed on the test. However, we provide you a separate quiz for each competency, and that makes it easier for you to decide if you need to review or study in a certain area. Okay? That's how it works. Anyone else? Yes, we'll get the number of questions for each competency. That's a great question. We're going to do that actually here in the workshop today. All right. So the next science competency is life science. I think we mentioned earlier that one word could be biology. Yes, that might be the closest word. However, this competency likely has a more wide-ranging set of concepts than all the others. So we're going to take some time again for you to work together and decide what concepts might be included in life science. What areas were the test writers asked to cover? All right, and before you start, I'll get you started here. One is characteristics. So this is how we better understand the plant and animal kingdoms, the characteristics, the names and labels we give to plants, the names and labels we give to animals. All right, so now your turn. Discuss this at your tables, and we'll compare your list with ours. Hey, thank you again for you joining us today live online. Continue to share your thoughts, and we'll include them in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this is another opportunity to pause that recording, and test your knowledge of life science. We'll be here when you restart the video. Okay, so we're back up here. Did anyone come up with classifications, kingdom, species, that sort of thing? Okay, a couple groups did. How about evolution, the evolution of life? Also a couple of groups here. Did anyone come up with life cycles? Any group, life cycles. So this is the developmental stages of growth, that sort of thing. Okay, so you did have this one. Or you just didn't call it that. Okay. Let's look at a couple more here. How about cell functions? Did anybody talk about cells? Do you remember there's three main functions? All right. Well, we get a bit more into that when you look at the activity guides when you get over to the training center. And the last competency is environment, or the last, I guess, should say concept is environment. And pretty much everybody had this. How can you describe this? I'll repeat it for those listening to recording. How plants and animals interact with their surroundings. How did I do? Is that right? How plants and animals interact with their surroundings. Okay, good. All right, let's take a look at some sample questions that represent life science. Cytoplasm, DNA, ribosomes, organelles, I believe. Looking up top. Here's a second example. Life science. And I believe this is the last one. On to the final competency then, which is teaching science. And there are 8 competencies related to teaching. We know that from the professional ed test, but about 4 of them are the main ones that represent teaching. And these are called the Florida Educator Accomplished Practices, or the FEAPs. We have a special workshop just for that. And here are the 3 professional test workshops that describe everything in more detail. Now that first workshop, that's an overview of all 8. It's called the Professional Education Test. Have anybody tried this yet? Not yet. A couple of you have. Okay, what we do is we put it into 3 areas, because in that first area, all 8 FEAPs. The second describes the major FEAPs. We talk about that because it's a 100-question test, and about 65 questions come from these first 3, or first 4, the major accomplished practices. And then the minor FEAPs is the other 35 questions or so. Okay, that's why they're called major and minor. Is that your question? Okay, so there's 100 questions on the professional ed test, 65 from the first section, 35 on the last 4. But what you need to worry about, or not worry about, be concerned about for science is the major FEAPs. So we have this little acronym here that helps us remind us what those 4 are. The first one is planning for learning. And on the professional ed test and subject area exams, planning really has to do with achieving standards, setting benchmarks, and that sort of thing. But on a science test, the emphasis is on safety. So you have to plan by thinking through all the procedures and equipment needed, especially if you're planning an experiment. The second FEAP, or the competency then, is environment, or more specifically, that's learning environment. And on the other test, the emphasis is on creating a student-centered environment where the student feels comfortable, non-threatened, safe. But on a science test, the emphasis is again on safety. All right, it's a different kind of safety. It's not mental safety, but it's what? What would you think? Physical safety in the classroom, right? Making sure that the room is safe, or that they're safe in that room. And the third competency then is strategies for teaching. This is different from planning, right? This is described also in the professional ed workshops. On this test, you might be seeing a trend for each strategy. It looks like we're going to say planning or safety here again, and you're correct, we are. This is what the teacher's doing during the lesson when the students are present. So they need to always consider the student's safety while they're teaching. And the final competency related to teaching science is assessment. How do you know the kids are learning? How can you document that? And what is the focus for assessment? No, it's not safety. It's differentiation. Think of this as allowing students to feel safe about demonstrating their learning, I guess you might want to say. So you know about this, differentiated instruction. Okay, these might become more clear with some sample questions. So let's go through a couple here. We're going to start down here at the bottom, predicting emergencies. What do we got here? Identifying materials, equipment and emergency supplies, and assigning students. That never sounds like a good idea, especially when we're talking about safety. So which of the 4 competencies? That's probably going to be a science question based on planning. It's going to be my guess. All right, here's another sample question. And finally, one more, I believe, in this area. There's an assessment question. Oh, there is one more. Okay, here we go. All right, so again, you can join the professional ed workshops anytime, free. They're on demand, like the people who are listening to us here today, to learn more about the FEEPs. And so here again, we have the competencies too. These are used by professional test writers to construct your science test. You asked before about this, so what do these numbers represent? Right, the numbers of questions that were created to check your understanding of each competency. Now that we've previewed the competencies, you'll likely have a better idea about your strongest areas, right? Okay. Now what do you know about then? That's the number of questions. What do you know about the percent to pass? Does anybody look this up? 71%. Yes. Seems kind of low, doesn't it? But that's pretty normal for a standardized test. I've seen them as low as in the 60s, and the highest probably is 78%, but this is right in the middle, 71%. Okay, and we know that there's 55 test items, so the number of correct answers is, we did the math here for you, 39 or 40, right in that neighborhood. So another way to look at it is say, go find your 39. That's what we trained over there in the testing center. All right, one more time. Let's do this. Look at it in a different way. Which would you choose? If you got to go get ready to study for this thing, which is your most challenging section? Which one do you feel more comfortable in? So what are you doing here? How do you get ready for a standardized test? We'll come back as a group and compare the ideas that you talk about there at the tables. Again, for you joining us today live online, share your thoughts this one last time. We'll include them in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this might be a good time to pause the recording, take stock of these numbers of questions, and decide where would you start your review and study for multiple choice tests like this. And we'll be here when you restart the video. Okay, welcome back. If you've participated in the other workshops, you likely remember we agreed there really is no best approach. In either case, though, we agreed we're probably going to have to go back and do some kind of a review and study for this. So let's talk about the tools that you can use when you start to prepare. We call these tools study resources that you might need. And the best and most reliable resources are on our site. We'll be able to show you those in just a moment. You recognize this sign if you've been with us before. These are folks that have gone before you. They leave messages along the way, and their message for this is, do not spend a lot of time and money on expensive resources. You just don't need them for this test. Commercial webinars are a good example. You can avoid paying for free test information and free strategies is what they say. We're also hearing from them that there are expensive tutors and tutoring companies out there. This might be an option for maybe a chemistry test or, I don't know, anatomy and physiology, but certainly not for this one that only goes through middle school concepts and curriculum. Overpriced study guides are out there too. Beware of those. We've heard of people paying over $30, $40. Have you seen these in the stores? $50, $45 or $50 for a study guide, when many of them really are either free or inexpensive. And a more effective and inexpensive resource then is the textbooks, is now you know the competencies being tested. You could use textbooks to review and study test content. So over at the training site, you're going to find this area called My Resources. And that's where we post the most popular and up-to-date study resources and tools. You can see there the study guides are just only $5 on Amazon. So certainly you wouldn't want to go out and spend a whole lot of money on that. So instead of investing time and money on resources, their suggestion is invest in yourself. Invest in getting those skills that you can pass on to your students. Practice your test skills. You can expect to gain confidence, personal independence, and again, you can pass these skills on to your students. Now, your pass provides admission to all of the training areas that you see here. Up there at the top, you're going to start with My Test, and that's the activity that enables you to check your understanding of the blueprint that we talked about here today. And you can also take a pre-test before the training right there in the My Test area. This is the test camp problem solving system up here. The first step to finding a correct answer up at the top. There you go, activity 2 there. Identify the type of question. We've been doing that here today. Quizzes and tests provide an opportunity to practice your test skills. All right, so you can assess your test content knowledge along the way. And I think you can see here that we broke apart quiz 3 and 4 to make it easier for you, the Earth and Space Science. And the questions and answers change randomly on each attempt. Over in the test area are practice test and a post-test. If you complete that post-test, you can earn a professional test certificate that guarantees your success. And then you can expect to perform with the confidence that comes from the knowledge and the skills earned during the training. All right, so there's no better time than now to empower your test confidence.